I'm Pakistani. I'm Muslim and my husband's Catholic. So culturally, a lot of the things we do are different from my mom's side. But the pressure of how things are supposed to be done by culture, especially from my side of the family, it's really high. So for the longest time, when I started putting my firstborn even to sleep on his own in the crib, I actually didn't tell my mom because she would actually just yell at me. And even to this day, she gives me such a hard time that my kids are on the second floor of the house and we're on the first floor because that's where her bedroom is. And the fact that we're on different floors, how can I be leaving my kids alone? The kids need to be in the same room and bed with us. So that's her mentality. The kids shouldn't be left alone. And culturally, that's how everybody does it. So Pakistanis, they normally co-sleep all their babies. And that's something that's really big in the culture. So that was very hard and different.
That was a snippet of my chat with Terri Fry. She's a mom of 2 little boys, age 5 and 3, and lives in Canada with her husband. Terri was born in Pakistan and lived there until she was 10. Her husband is German Scottish and Catholic. Terri is Pakistani and Muslim. So in this episode, we dive into how parenting in a multicultural home can be a challenge. Terri also shares how each of her kids are so different and requires a completely different approach to figuring out what works for them individually. We also touch on the perception of attaining balance as a parent and how Terri feels we can curb mom judgment. Welcome to the This Is Parenting podcast, a show devoted to sharing the roller coaster journey of parenthood from moms and dads all over the world. I'm your host, Andrea Rhodes. Information and show notes about today's episode can be found at thisisparentingpodcast.com. Let's get started. Hey, Terri, thank you so much for joining me today. I am very excited to chat with you. First, why don't you let my audience know a little bit about you and your family? Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show, Andrea. So I'm Terri, as you just said, and I am from Canada. I live in Canada, but I was born in Pakistan. And I'm married to a Caucasian Canadian, so he's German Scottish. And we have 2 kids together, a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old boy, both boys. So our kids are growing up in a very interracial, like a multicultural household where, we're sharing 2 different religions and 2 different backgrounds. So really kind of bringing it all together. And I am a working mom. I work full time, but I also do a podcast on the side. And really, that's what there is about me.
All right. Well, I have a lot I want to dive into because I think you have a really interesting family dynamic going on and just a whole lot of things I want to chat about and dive into a little bit more. But first, I ask all of my guests the same question to kind of kick things off. What does your bedtime routine look like right now with your 2 boys?
Oh my God. It's so different for both the boys. So my firstborn, who's 5, his bedtime is generally, it varies. It's like 9 o'clock is when he goes to bed. And until then, before he goes to bed, he ends up playing on his iPad. And before he starts playing on his iPad, he's learning how to read properly. And I've assigned that duty to dad because I don't want to deal with it. So he does that. And then he plays on his iPad for a little bit. And then he just kind of goes to sleep around 9 o'clock. And before that, it's my other son who's 3. He's in bed by 7:30 every single night. He reads a little book, we sing some songs, and he gets in his crib and he sleeps with no assistance at all. He just wants to be left alone. And you turn off all the lights and he's gone. My older son, though, requires a lot of assistance and cuddling to fall asleep. So very different bedtime routines for the kids. And before that, we just do regular dinner in front of TV around 6 o'clock with the kids and any activities that they've got going on. So right now, one night a week, they're playing ball hockey. So they go and play ball hockey before any of their bedtime stuff.
I'm not familiar with ball hockey. What is that?
Oh, okay. So it's ice hockey, except it's not on ice. It's not played with a puck. It's played with a ball, same sticks, and it's just in a rink like a non-ice rink.
Oh, nice. Less injuries.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess definitely less injuries, but they're going to be playing ice hockey soon. They're just weak skaters, so that's why we haven't put them in there. And of course, being in Canada, We're really big in hockey.
That's true. So it's like an introductory level, the skate.
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay, I gotcha. Well, you mentioned a few things in your introduction, but what is something that you would consider to be unique to your parenting journey?
Okay, so what's really unique is that both the kids, even though they are being raised exactly the same way, they both have very different needs. And therefore, because they're so different from each other, what we do with them, how their bedtimes are, and everything that happens with them is very tailored to each of their specific ways that they are. And it's interesting because, when you have a kid, you think you're going to be a certain type of parent, and that's exactly how you're going to do things. And then you have a second kid, and then that changes you. And you realize so quickly that each child has very specific needs, and you can't have a one size fits all in the family. And that's why you have to cater to them. And with that being said, for me, the biggest realization was that I'm not doing anything wrong because my firstborn, he was in bed with us for the longest time. We still have a hard time getting him out because he'll fall asleep on his own, but he'll come down and he'll leave his bed like 3 a.m. He'll go pee, he'll come down and sleep with us, and I don't even realize it. And it's interesting with him, my mom kind of really encouraged, not just encouraged, but made me feel guilty about him not sleeping with us, because how can you leave a baby alone? And that comes from my cultural background. Whereas with my second born, I was like, there's no way I'm having this kid in bed with me. But he didn't need that kind of touch and emotional affection at nighttime to put him to sleep anyway. He was always put me down from day one, put me down, I'm going to be ready to fall asleep. So it's interesting how we're raising them both very differently and how some of the cultural dynamics have played into the decisions I've made.
Yeah, tell me more about the culture dynamics that you mentioned. I have to imagine that it has been a really interesting transition as with you living in Canada, but having such a different background. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Oh, for sure. So culturally, I'm Pakistani. I'm Muslim and my husband's Catholic. So culturally, a lot of the things we do are different from my mom's side, even though I live in Canada and we do things very different from what we would culturally. But the pressure of how things are supposed to be done by culture, especially from my side of the family, it's really high. So for the longest time, when I started putting my firstborn even to sleep on his own in the crib, I actually didn't tell my mom because she would actually just yell at me. And even to this day, she gives me such a hard time that my kids are on the second floor of the house and we're on the first floor because that's where her bedroom is. And the fact that we're on different floors, how can I be leaving my kids alone? The kids need to be in the same room and bed with us. So that's her mentality. The kids shouldn't be left alone. And culturally, that's how everybody does it. So Pakistanis, they normally co-sleep all their babies. And that's something that's really big in the culture. So that was very hard and different just from a sleeping perspective. And there's so many other things too. The fact that my kids like eat on their own, that I don't feed them, like hand feed them. So my mom kind of hand fed me till I was 12. Spoon
Whoa,
fed
that is
me.
different.
Yeah. Because, she just thought it was quicker and she'd make sure I would eat. So the fact that both my boys eat on their own, my older one does not require any assistance to go to the bathroom. I'm not going to help him. Those kind of things sometimes bother her because she feels like I need to be more involved in these day-to-day activities, like feeding them. So like even to this day, she makes comments about, oh, how my kids are being fed on their own.
So how do you kind of approach that with your mom? Because I'm sure you want to still have kind of an open relationship with your mom. I know personally with my journey into motherhood, it's certainly given me a different view into what my mom's journey was with me and raising me and my sister. So how do you approach that with your mom, knowing that there is going to be some cultural differences between how you guys are raising your children?
Oh, for sure. You know what? I tend to pick my battles because it doesn't just stop there, especially because the kids are being raised with two different religions and we haven't technically picked a religion for the kids, right? So both of us are allowing the kids to grow up and decide on their own. It's not fair for them to have to be forced into a religion when we're both from different religions. So we raise them to the different cultures, the traditional aspects of things. So those are the battles where I'm more stern about. So when she gets into it with me about maybe you should teach him some prayers. Maybe he needs, you need to model that for them because I'm not religious at all. And she's like, maybe you should model that for them. Maybe you need to put them in Arabic school so they can learn how to read the Quran one day and all these things, because she worries that they won't know how to read the Quran. So those are the things where I get really stern about, where I'm like, you just need to drop it. There's another religion at home they're being raised with. So we'll decide. Normally she's good about it, but sometimes she really gets in my face about it. And that just when she's emotional. And then other times with all the other little things, I'm just like, yeah, of course I'll do it. And she knows too. She knows I'm just saying it and I don't really mean it, but she still wants to be able to say it just because she feels like then she has a say in it.
What has surprised you about how you parent?
I always worried that I would turn out just like my mom, but sometimes it still shocks me. Like there's certain things I do, the way I try to discipline them, and like I take the same tone my mom used to take. So, but on the other hand, I am surprised on how fluid I am with all the choices that I'm making with the kids, because I was raised in such a different environment. My birth, like my whole childhood was extremely controlled, and I just thought at some subconscious level that I'm going to turn out that way because that's how I've been raised, even though that's something I didn't want at all. So I'm surprised that I've let go of those things so much that I'm not modeling that, and just how fluid I am with everything, with all the choices, and how quick I am to kind of stand up to my parents about some key choices where, my youngest son, he's got really long hair. So my mom, she just culturally, she's not aware of everything. Like it's culturally, she still has a different mentality. So she thinks that he's going to be gay if I don't cut his hair. So, she's like, he's going to turn into a girl. I'm like, well, if he wants to turn into a girl, he'll turn into a girl. I can't stop him. So she'll really freak out when I say things like that. But I'm also surprised, like in a pleasant way, how accepting I am of all the different ways that I'm okay with raising them. The other thing is I didn't realize how emotionally connected I will be to myself and to them once I've had kids. I feel that having kids has helped me become just more self-aware of the choices I make in general in my life. The choices I make in terms of incorporating the two cultures or keeping certain things like the religious aspects out. These are very conscious choices because at the end of the day, I want my kids to grow up and be able to make decisions on their own without any forceful influence, especially when it comes to religion. And just how much research I've been doing just on raising kids because of it.
I agree. All the little choices we make daily is exhausting, and then we have big choices like that that is going to shape how your kids are raised and who they're going to become. And it's just a lot. It's exhausting, and yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, and especially because we have two different religions. For me, it's like this balance I have to figure out. How do I raise my kids where they are going to be extremely respectful of both the cultures and both the races involved? Because the last thing I want is my kids to grow up and look down on brown people, essentially, because some of them who've just come new to the country or are very in tune with that culture, because I've seen that happen. Because I grew up in Pakistan and I didn't move to North America until I was about 10. And once I moved there, I found that I made more friends and I was more comfortable with people who were in brown, because people who were Pakistani or brown in general used to kind of shun me because I was a fob, because I didn't grow up in that environment, because I had an accent at that time. So they were almost ashamed to talk to me. In fact, one of the girls who took me in, she said to me, "It's like, don't ever talk in Urdu in front of people because that's just really bad." So she made me feel so conscious of my culture. And, I'm hoping that I'm going to do the right things, that my kids will grow up and just be respectful of all races and be accepting of both parts that they are made of. They're Pakistani and they're also German Scottish. So there's a lot of ethnicities involved in their blood. And that's my biggest fear, that they won't be able to respect that. So that's something we'll find out. All I can do is teach them.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like it's a cornerstone of how you are parenting, right? Like that's one of your really big goals in raising your kids and making sure that they are conscious of who they are, where they come from, but to respect everybody and everybody's diversity.
Yeah, for sure. That's really important.
With the difference in cultures and religion in your home, what do you and your partner disagree about when it comes to parenting?
That's a good question. So my partner doesn't disagree with me a lot because I'm a very strong personality. He likes to say, "Yes, dear, you're right, dear. I'm sorry, dear." A lot. No, we're pretty much aligned um on how we want to raise kids. I think for us, the little stuff doesn't matter. We just agree on little things all the time. Also because with the two kids that we have, one of them is really complex, like complex minded. There's a lot of complexities involved with his emotional nurturing, and you have to be very tactical. My oldest one, and my younger one is very simple, and his emotions almost feel very binary, and you can direct him and his feelings in any way you want. He can be easily distracted. So my husband is also that way. He's also very simple in terms of his feelings, and he can easily, change direction. He's not as stubborn as I am, whereas I'm very complex. So my feelings and emotions are also very complex. So how we handle the two kids in terms of complex emotions and how to kind of guide them, sometimes we definitely disagree on that. But overall, the bigger picture is the respect and love and kindness for everybody, and making sure that they're growing up in an environment where they feel comfortable with their sexuality and whoever they want to be. I think those things are like those are their building blocks of our relationship and how we're raising our kids. But everything else, you disagree and you just move on.
What would you say in this moment is the worst thing about being a parent?
Oh my God. That's such a good question. I don't know. You know what? If you asked me like a week later when I'm more hormonal because my period's about to start, I'd probably have a whole list of things to tell you. But right now, it's just, I think the worst thing, I guess, for me is because I'm a working mom, like I work full time, is just trying to find a balance and just like how to devote time to both and how to make time for yourself and the things that are really important to you. I guess that could sometimes be a struggle. I mean, I still balance it or whatever the balance looks like. It's not really real, but it's just hard to say. I think it's because also their ages are like that too. Just they're so young. There's like, they are leaving their teenagers, the toddler, the tantrum years. So they're becoming more consistent. And yeah, you caught me at a non-hormone time. We'll come back to this question. If I find the right answer, I'll let you know.
Well, you mentioned something that I thought was interesting. Tell me more about when you mentioned that the balance isn't real. What did you mean by that?
So, okay, it's interesting. I just did a whole podcast episode on this because it's a very requested topic, right? Everybody wants to know, how do moms balance everything? I just think that balance isn't real. If you're trying to balance everything in life, it's just not going to happen. You only have so many hours to give. And within those hours, if you want to add more to your plate, something always has to go. So even if you're only doing 3 things with your day and that's what you're used to, that is your balance. So if you want to add a 4th thing, you have to make time for it. That means something else has to go. So when we're trying to like find this balance in life as parents or just people, we're kind of searching for that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, because your life will constantly be on a seesaw almost. It's always going to tip up and down. And that's just a reality. So we just need to stop seeking for that perfect balance, because it will never exist. And there will always be something that will throw things off. And that's something I try really, like, I'm very cognizant about and try to really live, reflect. I reflect on this a lot. I try to really be real with it. So I try not to let things bother me when I can't fit everything in, because it's just a gong show.
What do you wish there was less of in parenting culture today?
Oh my God, less judgment. And I think we talk about that a lot, right? And that's my issue too. So this is this weird, complex world that we live in. We judge a lot, but we talk about not judging a lot. So what are we doing? We want to send this persona out to the world that we as moms are not judgmental. But when you look at your mom's circle, there's always one person who's judging you. And anything outside of the circle, you don't feel comfortable approaching everybody and being open with everybody about the things that you're going through, how you're feeling, your vulnerable moments, and how you think you're failing because you're afraid of being judged. So if this persona that's been created in social media, where everybody, all moms are like, we have to judge less, we have to have each other's back. If that's really real, why are we still feeling not open enough, not comfortable enough to be able to talk about our vulnerable moments and our insecurities and talk about how we just think that we're failing sometimes, because half the time you don't know what you're doing, if it's right or not. We won't know until way later. Then we can decide what we want to take. Yeah, we can take credit for the good things they do. And if, all the bad things that they do, we can just be like, well, that's because you didn't listen to me.
So how do you think we can better approach that the entire topic of judgment? And I do agree. I mean, it's such a hot topic and everyone wants less of it.
Yeah.
But I don't often hear actionable steps to remedy it.
That's exactly it. What we need to start doing is we should say that, you know what, you're doing a great job no matter what decision you're choosing. That's awesome. I think we still need to hear that. But I think in the way we need to share our real stories. So this perfect curated world of Instagram, we need to step away from it, because people look at what you're doing online and then they start wondering if they're doing a good enough job or not. When they start wondering that, they become insecure. And also because they don't have a good, a really confident relationship with their own self, probably. So when you're not feeling good enough, you're not going to be comfortable with sharing that information with other people, because you're going to feel afraid that you might be judged. And I think in order for us to start taking that away, we need to start leading with vulnerability. And we need to become more vulnerable leaders in our lives, where we are talking about our emotions and how we can self-reflect and understand the part we are playing in the big picture of things that impact us and things that impact others. We have to start taking that accountability and talk about it. Because once you start talking about it with other people, you're starting to take the walls down and you're giving other people the platform to be able to say, you know what, I feel this way too. And people not everybody will be able to do that, but some people, especially people who are really high up in social media, they really need to lead with vulnerability, and not just in a funny way that, a lot of comical stuff is around there too. We need to start taking this topic a little more seriously and really shed a serious light. And there's definitely people who are doing that. I think we just need to increase that.
Yeah, I am starting to see that a little bit more and more, just people showing like the real side of parenting, and that's becoming a thing, which is good. I often wonder if we are so afraid to show the raw side of parenting because the stakes are so high, right? This is the most personal thing that somebody could have an opinion about us, and we want the best for our kids and we want our decisions to be the right decisions. It's really hard to show anybody outside of your inner circle a decision that you've made around your kids and your family because the stakes are so high. I wonder, I mean, I love your approach of kind of leading with vulnerability. And I wonder how we get to that across, across this motherhood niche.
Yeah. You raise such a good point. I think often people confuse leading with vulnerability with completely exposing everything that's happening in your life. And I don't think you need to do that. I think it's just that there are moments that can be shared, and just being able to be open about it. So let's just take work as an example. When you're at work and you're a leader at work, and a lot of the stuff that you're doing, if other people are depending on it, if you make a mistake, and you don't own up to it, there's a lot of negativity that can come out of it from other people because they know you made a mistake and they lose a little bit of respect for you. But as soon as you come forward and say, you know what, I screwed up, this was my fault, I should have done this, and I'm so sorry I didn't, I don't know what happened, I was I was just having a moment, or I was too caught up, I'm going to be better. people automatically start respecting you more, because we're all humans. We're all going to make mistakes. And it's just being able to say that, oh my God, I did this thing and I could have done this better. I should have done better. It was something I screwed up on. I think that goes such a long way with people for being able to respect you. And I think because I work in an environment like that, where a lot of us are leaders in that way, and we're the first ones to take ownership and talk about it. We see that people respect us, and that bleeds out into my personal life, where I'm still not like that with my husband. Don't get me wrong, because I'm always right. You know, I'm not that great. But with my other relationships, I'm able to kind of just step forward and say, like, again, it's all probably just in my closer circle, or anybody who's willing to listen to me, is, you know, this is how I'm feeling. And sometimes I just don't feel I'm good enough. And sometimes I feel that my actions are probably going to have, what if they have a negative impact? I think you can't do that openly in a public setting. You have to have one-on-one conversations. You can't speak to a crowd about this and post about this on social media, and, you know, it's not going to fix it. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
I think you're onto something there, where if you are feeling vulnerable in a situation, that you should hopefully have somebody that you can lean on to kind of talk about that with, which opens the door to those types of discussions with the other party as well, because you know you're not the only one feeling that way.
Yeah. Okay, so let's take marriage as an example. Before you get married, for people who've chosen that path, right? And when you have problems in your relationships, you're more open to talk about, oh, me and my boyfriend are having issues, right?
Yes.
The minute you get married, it's almost like it's the view of all of us is that marriage is the end. You've reached the end, and therefore everything has to be perfect from this point onwards. So you don't talk about your problems. Not that you should be airing out all your dirty laundry, but you know, when you have kids, especially young kids, and your life has changed so much, that takes a toll on everything in your life, because you're trying to figure out this new you, your new relationship, and that can also rock your marriage. And that is going to happen to every single person, whether you have kids or not. If you're in a relationship, whether you're married or not, you're going to go through issues and problems, but we don't want to talk about it at all, because it's a stigma. Oh, if they're fighting, they might be getting a divorce. And people are afraid of those labels. But I think if you could just even put it as simply as that, you know, often my husband and I have to try and navigate some of the things that we're trying to, we're having struggles, you know, navigating through. We're having problems. It doesn't mean that we're going to get divorced. It just means that we're just having a bumpy ride, and it's going to go up and down. I think if we do more of that, as opposed to just hiding things and pretending everything's perfect, I think that's just going to go a long way.
If you could go back and tell your pre-kid self something, what would it be?
Oh, pre-kid self. I don't know. Oh yeah. No, I actually don't have anything. I'm pretty content with how things have turned out. I think when things are awful, it's going to be awful. I mean, I've learned things along the way. I mean, before I had kids, I was really skinny. I had like a really hot body. And, you know, since having kids has really been a struggle trying to find that balance, you know, and trying to get in shape. And I obsessed over it for a long time, and I still have a lot of body issues. And I think if I could just tell myself before that stop having those expectations, that would be something that will go a long way for me, or any parent. Or actually, this is important. I just realized this. So we try to prepare parents all the time about all the things they can expect from having a baby, how to prepare for your birth, how to prepare for your delivery, and, you know, how to feed your child, all of those things. But the one thing I didn't know until I had a kid was all the emotional changes I'll go through, and how complex my emotions, even around having a child, would become. So when I had my firstborn, everybody would ask me, how does it feel to be a mom? I hated that question, because automatically I knew I had to say, it's awesome. I love it. And I do love it. Don't get me wrong. But inside my head, there were a multitude of things that I was going through. And I couldn't just express all of those without feeling judged, that people think I'm being ungrateful for this child. So if I could just tell myself, go back and tell myself that be prepared that you're going through a major roller coaster, and there's going to be a lot of emotions that come with being a parent, and they're not just happiness and love, then I think it would have gone a long way.
Yeah, I think too often we get that rosy picture in our head of what it's going to be like, that bond with your child, and everything's going to be, I'm not going to say easy. I don't think anyone's that naive, but that the highs will always outnumber the lows. And those early days, that's often not what's happening.
Yeah. Then there was a quote like, 80% of this is work. Being a parent, a lot of work, and only 20% is the feel good fuzzy stuff, but you live for the 20%.
Oh, definitely. And the 20% is worth it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Some days it may not feel like it.
But those early days especially are they're just rough.
Yeah, oh, for sure. You know what? Puppies are easier than No, actually, no, I changed my mind because, oh my God, you can put a diaper on a baby, but you cannot put a diaper on a puppy. Potty training a dog is the worst.
Potty training a dog is for real.
Yeah.
All right, Terri. Well, thank you so much for stopping by. I really enjoyed this chat. I want to make sure everyone knows where they can find you and follow you, because I know you're doing some really great things with your new podcast. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about that?
Awesome. Well, first, thank you for having me. I think this was a great conversation. You asked some great questions. My podcast is called Mom Like That Podcast, and you can find me on Instagram. It's Mom Like That Podcast, and that's my handle. I'm with that handle on Facebook as well. And my podcast is on iTunes, it's on Google Play, it's on Spotify, anywhere that you can listen to a podcast is likely available. So that's how you can find me. I normally hang out on Instagram more than any other place. So that's where you'll definitely find me.
All right. Well, thank you so much for stopping by, and we'll chat later.
Awesome. Have a good day.
Thank you to Terri for joining me today. I'm so glad we were able to cover so many topics, and she was honest about her mom journey. You can catch Terri chatting about mom life on her podcast, Mom Like That, and I'll be sure to link to her podcast and Instagram account in the show notes, so go check her out. And don't forget to please those podcast gods, leave a rating and review. It helps so much, so I appreciate it when you do. Thank you for tuning in to the This Is Parenting podcast.